and what we'll be looking at when we go out on listing appointments and things like that. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So I think I'm going to share my screen. We have a PowerPoint that goes along with this. So let me see if I can get my screen going here. Yeah.
Do you have controls at the bottom, Don?
Yeah, I'm looking. Hey, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay.
With my headphones on, so it's better. But
okay. We're trying to find the right screen. Oh, there it is.
It's the up arrow. Yep.
If it'd been a snake, it would have bit me. Right? Isn't that what they say?
There you go.
All right. So, view slideshow. Are we there? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So really, there's 4 different things when it comes to objections from a seller. There's really going to be 4 main things that we have to focus on, and it's the things that are probably going to be an objection with just about every seller, not every single one. It kind of depends on the situation, but really we're going to focus on one aspect of that today, the things that we'll run into. So let's see if I can go ahead and. So handling objections, like it says, that really it's an opportunity, because if they weren't really interested, if the answer was just going to be no, why argue about it? And a lot of times when we think of objections, we think of an argument, that somebody's objecting. And so now all of a sudden it puts us on the defensive and puts us in a position of having to defend what it is that we're trying to say or what it is that we're trying to get across. But it really is. It's an opportunity that if we can do that, if we can really make them see our side, you may not win, but at least down the road, they may learn that what you were saying was correct. And so, a lot of times there are people who will take a listing, even though they know it's overpriced, or even though they know that it's not going to sell for that amount, the agent will go ahead and take it anyway. And that's certainly a strategy that you can employ. It's not one way's right and the other way's not. Some agents will absolutely, if I can't get it for what I want, I'm not going to take it. But some other agents will say, okay, even though I know that it's not what I think it really is going to go for, I'm going to go ahead and take it anyway, because I know that over time they're going to start getting more realistic. They're going to start seeing that what I was saying was correct, and then it'll start coming down. Like I said, there's no right or wrong way. It's really whatever strategy you decide to employ. But the warning here is that if you go ahead and take it for the higher amount, that you need to make it clear to them that what you believe it should go for, because later on it may end up there. And you'd be surprised how many sellers will double back on you. You think every seller wants to sell it for as much as they can, and that's really their driving motivation. But sometimes it's not. I've had situations where I have heard that a seller would say, if you had just told me the truth in the beginning, if you had just told me what it will really sell for, that's what I would have gone with. That it really wasn't the price that was the driving motivation. It was time. That, time sometimes is what drives them more than anything else. I would rather take a little bit lower price on the property and not have to move twice, so maybe it's the timing. So think of an objection as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to get your point across, even though you may not win. If you want to call it an argument, you may not win your point, but at least it does create in the mind of the seller exactly what it is that you're thinking. And you can make them believe that, hey, even though I'm not necessarily on board with this number, that doesn't mean I'm not going to push as hard as I can. So that may be another part of the conversation that you have to have as well. Say that even though I don't really think that this is what it's going to sell for, that's not going to stop me from pushing it at this price. That's my job. You gave me a lawful instruction. I'm going to follow that lawful instruction. I'm loyal to you as you being my client. Loyalty means that I'm always looking out for your best interest. And really the only way that I can look out for your best interest is to be on your side. So I may disagree with you right here, right now, but when I get out there, all bets are off as far as that. I will go along with whatever you instruct me to do.
Hey, Don.
Yes, sir.
Play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Why would an agent argue the case why they would take a listing when they know it's overpriced?
If they know it's overpriced, well, maybe if it's not too far overpriced, maybe the belief is that over time they will get realistic. They will get to the point where eventually it'll get down to where it should be. And if somebody's trying to break into a neighborhood, the more exposure they get, they see more signs out in the yard. As long as those signs don't sit there too long, of course, then it starts becoming a negative. But if they're trying to break into a neighborhood and people start seeing activity there, that might be a selfish reason to do it.
Okay. One more thing. Let's say a seller's adamant about a price that but it's 10,000 too high or whatever. Do you have a strategy as to let them know up front, and then that there's a plan in place to change the price?
Yeah, so maybe we'll do a listing amendment. Maybe at the time of listing, we'll do a listing amendment and say, all right, I'm going to do everything I can to try to get this house to move at $425,000 over the next 30 days. But hey, let's be realistic. If that doesn't work out, we need to have a plan to be able to move forward. So we'll ride with this for 30 days, but I would like to go ahead and put this amendment in place now, dated 30 days from now, that if we don't have the amount of activity that we think we should have, that we'll drop it to 410 or 415 or whatever.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yep. I can tell he's done that before. Because you have to have that in place. And if the real goal here is to get to the end of the transaction, you don't want to fly by the seat of your pants. You want to have a strategy in place, know exactly what your plan is, because 30 days from now, if you wait until 30 days from now and say, hey, I don't think this is really going where we think it needs to go, I think that maybe we need to rethink the pricing here. They may not go along with you. So yeah, it makes sense now.
I've taught this before, Don, to our agents, but I'm going to remind everybody again too, is they need to know that you know what you're doing, that you have a strategy in place, and we're pricing the property together. And the market's going to tell us in a short order of time if we're priced correctly. And based on the data we receive in number of showings, the feedback from agents, the number of offers we get, we'll know where we're at as far as price goes. And then what I do is I always set them up. We're talking about, we're giving a report every Friday, and every 2 weeks we're talking about price. We may not be moving the price, but we're talking about price. So it sets the agent up to have the expectation, sets the seller up to know that as well. And whether you have an amendment signed up front, or you have, here's the data we're talking about every single week, here's how the market's changing, we won't want to miss the market. Here we go. And it really sets the sellers up, and they have a plan. Like, if it doesn't sell for this price, this is where we need to go. So they appreciate that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and the MLS is great for that. I know, people badmouth the MLS, and we've gone through all kinds of issues with them here over the last 8, 10, 12 months, but there's your market. I mean, primarily right there, the number of showings. If you have this property listed in a database like MLS, especially here in Houston, we're actually pretty lucky. The HAR MLS system takes in so much and so many agents. You've got 46,000 agents who are all part of the MLS system. If you're exposing this property to 46,000 people and none of them are showing their clients this property, something's wrong. You've got to know that something's not right. Either it's overpriced, or there's something not listed correctly, or something. So yeah. All right. So Best way to handle any objection is to handle it before it becomes an objection, if you can. The script when working with a buyer or seller should anticipate what those objections are going to be. And so that's what we're going to be looking at, is the 4 most common objections. And we're going to focus on one of them today and try to take care of that or address it before the objection even comes up. And like I says, best way to put out any fire is to prevent it to begin with. So these are the 4 main objections that you're probably going to run into when you're working with the seller. Number 1, whether or not to accept your pricing. We have that argument all the time. Oh, there's that word argument. We have that objection all the time, right? That we think their house is worth a certain amount, but because it's their house, they think, well, no, it's worth so much more just because it is their house. Whether that really has any bearing or not, to them it does. Whether or not to list for your period of time, the length of time. And that one we kind of have to watch and see what's going on in the market. If I were taking a listing today, where even though MLS says that the average time on the market may be 58, 60, 65 days, I want to give myself an adequate amount of time to market this property. One of the worst things that can happen is that you take this listing for 90 days and average time on the market is 80 days. And you get to the end of your 90 days, property's not sold. And the seller says, well, you didn't do your job. I'm going on and I'm going to list for somebody else. They list for somebody else. And within 10 days, it goes under contract. And it has nothing to do with what they did. Most likely you were the one responsible for it from all the marketing and stuff that you did. But the way that seller looks at it, you had it for 90 days and did nothing. This person had it for 10 days and look what they went under contract. So it's like all of a sudden they're a hero and you're a zero, and you don't want that. And so make sure you give yourself an adequate amount of time to be able to market that property. And it's not the same number for every piece of property. It's like how sometimes unique is this property. Well, sometimes there's a fine line between unique and weird. That, unique kind of implies that whatever it is that makes this property different is something desirable. But weird is, yeah, this property is different, but it really makes it difficult to market, finding that target market. So you kind of have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Number 3, whether or not to pay you what you're asking. That's the big one. Like, will you pay me my commission? What I want to make, are you willing to pay that? And of course, that one's probably has more bearing today than it has in months and years past. And the last one, whether or not you have the ability to adequately market their property. Do they truly believe that you have that ability, that you will do that? So those are the 4 things that we're going to look at. We're going to really focus on number 1 today, since we only have 45 minutes in this class. But
hey, Don.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking forward to the training on this, but in your training, look at the fact that a lot of times a seller will say, hey, I put $100,000 into the kitchen. It should be more. So talk about that. Yep.
So yeah, cost does not equal value. Obviously, that's the first conversation, is just because it costs you that much money to do what you did. First of all, we have that King of the Hill syndrome, and I'm not talking about the cartoon. I'm talking about King of the Hill is that you have done every conceivable upgrade, extra update that you can do, but it's too much. They talk about the principle of increasing and decreasing returns. That right? If you're going to spend $1 on something and you're not going to get $1 back in value, don't spend the $1. If it's a repair or something like that, then absolutely you need to do it. But if it's really just to try to increase the value of the property, like I'm thinking of putting my house on the market, so I'm thinking of taking and changing out all the flooring. Well, if it's really just to update to what is out there now, but what you have is not that bad, then it may not make sense to do. Yes, it may take a little longer to sell that property, but a lot of times it's just not going to make that much difference. One of the big ones that I run into a lot, and I'm sure everybody else does too, is a new roof. That I put a roof on. I put a roof on 2 years ago, and I spent $22,000 on that roof, so that should increase the value, or even a year ago, or even 6 months ago. So that should increase the value of the property. Well, it might, but it's not going to be not going to be $22,000. Funny thing about buyers, they expect the house to have a roof that doesn't leak. So it's not going to automatically add another $22,000 in value. It might move it faster because now the roof doesn't have to be replaced, and maybe some of the others in the neighborhood do, but it's not worth $22,000. Appraisers work off of what we call contributory value. And contributory value says that what I'm going to pay attention to as the appraiser is how much more do I think a buyer would be willing to pay for this property because it has this component, whatever that is. And they don't think that a buyer would pay $22,000 more for that house because it has a roof that's been replaced. They're happy about it, sure, and they might pay $5,000 more, $6,000 more, but it's not going to be $22,000. So, yeah, and that happens all the time, and that's why hopefully they'll have that discussion with you before you go out and list that property, where they say, "Do you think I should, do this or do that?" or any of those things, because it gives you the opportunity to talk about things like that, there's very few things that will probably add to the value of what you're looking for. There's a magazine out that comes out every year, and I've used this on my radio show. There is a magazine that comes out every year called Remodel Magazine. And Remodel Magazine will go through all the different improvements that you can do on your property, and it even breaks it down into part of the country. And it'll say that if you live in the South and you do this repair or you do this improvement, it's most likely going to cost this much money, and this is most likely how much value it's going to actually add to your property. And the only things that they ever say are even close to 100% inside the house, kitchen and bathrooms, and then outside, things like sprinkler systems and things like that. They come close, but the rest of the stuff, maybe 50%, maybe 60%. Most of the time, it's just not gonna be worth it. Have you found that too, Marty?
Yep, pretty much 60 to 70% at best case scenario on most things. Yep. So when a owner is upgrading, it's for their own enjoyment, not for resale. Yes, it improves the house, maybe sellability, but doesn't change the value much.
Yep. So that's what we said when my kids were younger. We put in a swimming pool, and we said you put in a pool because you want one, not because it adds value. We put in a pool because we wanted a pool, and we wanted to know where the kids were. So so there are reasons for that. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. All right. So those are the four things that we typically run into. So let's talk about price, accepting your price. So first of all, pricing a property properly, try to say that fast 3 times, is all about, I couldn't even say it once. It's all about, okay, whether or not I can convince a buyer or a buyer's agent the property is worth the amount that we are asking. That's our job as a real estate agent. That's really our job. Can I convince everybody else? Seller, you don't have to convince me. I have to convince you to some extent, but really, even beyond that, it's convince everybody else. Can we convince everybody else that the house is worth that number? So after the buyer, of course, we have the appraiser that we're going to have to deal with too. Price should never be arrived at based on what the seller, and these are the things the seller is going to look at. Number one, what the seller wants, what the seller needs, especially what the seller paid for it, although sometimes that'll definitely be a driving factor for them, or what the appraisal district assesses it for. We know assessed value is not correct, and we have that issue all the time. The problem we have to deal with when it comes to the assessed value for the appraisal district is that that's a matter of public record. Anybody can find it. Anybody can go online, hcad.org or whatever, MCAD, whatever appraisal district it is. They can see exactly what the property is assessed for. And of course, their thinking is, well, we all know that the taxing authorities want to squeeze us for every dime they can get. So they're gonna raise that assessed value just as high as they possibly can. So that must really be the value of the property. And so you've got the assessed value sitting at $350,000, and you've got an asking price of $400,000. And so when the buyer sees that, they think, oh man, that seller's out of their mind. What are they thinking? But that's not necessarily true, especially if this is somebody's homestead, because state legislature has a rule, has a law that if this is your homestead, your assessed value cannot increase more than 10% per year, no matter what the actual value has done. And so it wasn't that long ago, 2021, first half of 2022, where property values were increasing 20, 25, 30% in 2021, and then about another 15, 16, 17, 18% in 2022, even though the last half of 22 kind of killed us off some. But so that means that in 2023, 2024, and even what we're seeing now, and I'm running into this a whole bunch, and I bet you guys are too, where the assessed values are now coming out and people are saying, my house didn't increase 10% in value last year. You're right, it didn't. But it also didn't increase 10% in 2021 when it went up 10% and the real value went up 28 or 30%. They're playing catch up. I had this conversation with my wife this morning, right before it came to work. Ours came out, it went up 10%. And it's like, do you really think the value of our property went up 10% last year? Nope, sure don't. Well, we need to contest this. And I said, well, maybe. Let's take a look and see, because we've actually benefited from the fact over the last 2 or 3 years that the assessed value was not equal to the true value of the property. So we actually got off a little bit light the last 2 or 3 years. And now maybe it's starting to really just get to where it should be. People don't like to hear that, but it's the truth. It's the truth that just because it went up 10%, they may just be playing catch up. So we don't necessarily pay any attention to what the appraisal district says the house is worth, but we have to deal with that because buyers see it and they just naturally assume whatever number is there, that must be what the true value of the property is. This is one of those things that where we talk about being well informed and well advised, and sometimes those two things are not the same. They can be informed, they can see numbers, and so they think they get it. But that's where our advice and opinion, that's where our information, our ability to make them understand, our knowledge and experience is where that comes in handy, making them understand that, hey, just because you see a low number here doesn't really make sense that is necessarily the value of the property. And sometimes I even take it further. I say, let's just say the appraisal district made a mistake. Let's just say the appraisal district said 350,000 when it really should be 400,000. What seller do you think, or what owner do you think is going to call the Harris County Appraisal District and say, hey, what's wrong with you? My house is worth 400,000. You need to get that assessed value up there so I can pay more in taxes. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Hey, Don, this is a really good point too for all of our agents out there as well. These are readily available public records, right? Your assessed value, your appraised value there, whether it be a Redfin value or a Zillow value, buyers and sellers are looking at that. So you have to educate your seller on, hey, these are things that the public will be seeing. And so I'm going to educate you on what they actually mean and why it's different when I show you the comps and so forth. But also knowing that when the public looks at your property, they're going to be seeing these numbers. And so we'll have to explain to them as well, right?
Yep. Absolutely. And that's the thing about Zillow and the thing about Texas. What makes Texas different than a lot of other states is that we are a non-disclosure state when it comes to actual sales prices. There's nowhere in public, supposedly, where you can go and find out what a property actually sold for. We know it because it's in the MLS, because we agree when we join the Houston Association of Realtors and subscribe to the MLS system, we agree to keep accurate information in the MLS at all times so other agents can benefit from it. Oh, and of course, appraisers can too, because they have access to it too, but not the public. I mean, you go to har.com, you try to find out what a property sold for, they're going to give you a range. You know, they're going to say this property sold somewhere between $387,000 and $419,000. Oh, well, thanks. That helps me a lot. You know, and that's good for us because it's at least one piece of information that you and I have that the public doesn't have. So they do have to come to us for something. But Zillow, given the fact that they do get sales prices, that if you join, if you're an agent, you know this, if you're part of Zillow, that you have to send them your information. So they see what it sells for. They can't put it out there in public either, but Zillow will tell you that, you know, that their estimates are not always accurate. I think it was the CEO of Zillow a couple of years ago went and sold his property, his own personal property, and the Zestimate on his property was 18% off. So, you know, so you kind of get that idea right there that those numbers are not always accurate. All right, so our pricing. So what do we use? Of course, we use the MLS. That's probably the primary source, but we also have RPR. We have all these different resources that are available to us. And so that's what we need to be using. We need to be taking a look at this, whatever it is that we're going to be using. Like I said, probably MLS or RPR is going to be best. So it says you should have a strong set of pricing tools. If seller doesn't agree, go over the comps with them, tell them what you think, and at least you know if you're working with somebody who's reasonable but mistaken, or if you're dealing with somebody who's just going to be unreasonable. You know, you don't have to take every listing. Most agents will, but you don't have to take every listing if you don't want to. This is many times, once they see the comps in black and white, can't really come up with a good reason why, they answer their own objections. If they cannot give you some solid footing as to why they think, because again, they'll say, well, I did this and I did that. I've increased the value because I did this and I did that. And, you know, I changed out all the faucets. I changed out all the light fixtures and I did all that. And that's great because those are cosmetic things. But did the old stuff not work? If you're just updating and upgrading, there is a certain amount of increase in value there potentially. But again, it's not going to be what it costs you to do. That's for sure. I had somebody who told us that in their kitchen, because they had so many cabinets and so many drawers, that I don't know if you've priced the price of pulls lately, but they're like super expensive. You can spend 15, 20 bucks on each one. And so they spent like almost $2,000 altogether on their pulls. And they said, well, doesn't that add value? It's like, you could have put a string in there if you had wanted to. And I'm sorry, but yeah, nobody's going to pay you $2,000 more because you went to Lowe's and paid $2,000 for those cabinet and drawer pulls. Just not going to happen. They'll come up with the craziest things of what they think actually adds value. All right, so 2 strategies when listing the homes. We talked about a minute. Some agents will go ahead and take the listing at any price because they feel confident they can get the price down later. Other agents will only take listings if they can get them at the price they feel like it should be listed at. And one's not right and the other one's not wrong. Like it says, each one has its own advantages and disadvantages, and your strategy probably isn't always going to work one way or the other. There are times you have your own motivations too. You know, you've got your own reasons why you would want a listing in a certain place or not want a listing in a certain place. I personally felt like that if they were too far out of range, what I used to call the range of the unbelievable. You know, you get to that point where it's like nobody's going to believe that this property is worth that. If it was a neighborhood that I actually wanted to dominate in, I wouldn't take that listing. That to me, the value of having the sign was not outweighed by the problem of having the sign sitting out there for a long period of time, because people see that too. People see that, people know that too. So if you take a listing and your price is based on one of those things that it shouldn't be priced at, you're telling the seller that you believe you can get that price, unless you tell them, look, I don't think we can do this, but I'll definitely try. If you take it high and you tell them it's high, that could help later on, but it could also signal that you're desperate or your time isn't worth anything or you're not really sure of your numbers after all. And none of those that says are a good place to negotiate from later.
And
But
it's
an
true
advantage,
that we know that oftentimes, even they say they're going to lower the price, oftentimes they don't want to lower the price later on because they're committed to, I'm losing money if it doesn't sell at this price. So I'm one of those ones that learned that I usually don't take a listing that's high for that reason. Buffini always comments, Brian Buffini in training always said that the longer your sign's in a yard on a house hasn't sold, you're marketing your incompetence to the other agents. So be careful on the time. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And you and I are in a different place in our careers than a lot of people. Some people, it's like all about, I've got this sign that's sitting in my garage. I bought it and I haven't used it at all yet. And so maybe it's better out there. But yeah, and I'm with you. I'm the same thing. I'm the same way. I was sure enough of my price that if you're not going to go along with what I'm saying here, I mean, what are you hiring me for? You're hiring me for my advice. If you're not going to take my advice, then maybe I'm not the person for the job. But I know you and I like to control situations, so so definitely, I definitely understand that. I got to the point where my conversion rate was about 87, 88%. If I got my foot in the door, I could usually get what I wanted. So, and
Miguel
you can
said
get
that
there. Anybody can get there.
Yeah. Miguel said the NPR has the return on upgrades is typically about 30%, less than what we were talking about.
Woo!
And then Eve said that what's the name of that magazine again? Of course, it's Remodel Magazine, right?
Yep, Remodel Magazine. Yep. And I guess it's still out. I haven't been on the radio since 2011. So, but that's what I used to use. And I don't know if it's still out there or not. Probably is. All right, so a disadvantage, especially if this is a neighborhood that you want to work in, the longer it stays on the market, the more likely it is that sellers are going to shy away from using you as their listing agent because what has happened in the past, they think is a good indicator of what's going to happen now. So I don't want that sign sitting in my yard for 6 months or 8 months. Very few sellers will ever admit to their neighbors that they were the reason why the house has been sitting there as long as it has. It's always the agent's fault. No matter what it is, it's always the agent's fault. So how do we get a seller to agree to our pricing? And there's a couple of scripts, and there's a ton of scripts out there. Everybody has one that'll work. The one that I used to like a lot, and it kind of plays off the MLS because that's the most likely way that the house is going to sell. It's called Big House, Little House. So here's how it goes. Seller, if we list the price $20,000 higher than it should be listed for, then when agents and buyers go online and start looking at homes in that price range, yours is going to show up and it's going to be compared to others that are in that price range. Since you really shouldn't be in that range, it's unlikely that you will compare well to those other homes. And so nobody's going to come and look at yours except maybe agents who are using yours as leverage. They're going to use yours to sell the others. They're going to say, compared to yours, the others look that much more attractive. So they use you. It's like, okay, so here's what you could get for 310 or 410,000. They show it and it's like, oh, okay. And they say, or there's this other one over here because it's priced where it should be that has all this other stuff. And it's like, so there's no comparison. So that's big house, little house, or comparing yours, little house, to big houses because that's who you're trying to compete with. You're in that price range where you're trying to compete with houses that really should be there and yours shouldn't. On the other hand, when buyers and agents go online to pull up $20,000 less, where yours would compete nicely, then your home will not be there and won't even be one for them to see. So like they create that artificial, that arbitrary point. They say, I don't want to see anything over 400,000. And if you're at 420, now you're being compared to 400 to 450 or whatever, but where you really should be, which is maybe 390, 395, where you would compete nicely, that's what they're pulling up and you're not even there. I always liked that script. I always thought that was one that makes them see that, yeah, it'd be nice if you could sell it for that, but you're just not going to be able to compete. So number of graphics available on HAR, and they're still out there. And it will also show a seller what percentage of the available buyer pool will be willing to look at their house given the list price. And I like these tools. I have them in my listing presentation, and I think it might be one you might want to look at. This one just shows, even at market value, that's the crazy one. And a lot of people don't understand that even if you price it where it should be priced, you're still only going to get about 60% of the potential buyers who would buy that property looking at it. And the reason for that is because you still always have those buyers out there who are not looking for a home, they're looking for a deal. And so because you're priced where you should be, they're going to pass that one by. You don't want them anyway. That's your low ball offer.
Mm-hmm.
That's where somebody might come along and say, yeah, maybe the house is worth that, but I want a deal. And so they come in 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 less. But look what happens if I even increase by 10%. If it should be 300,000 and I go 5 to 10% above, I'm losing business down to where 50% of that 60% will drop off, completely drop off, and just not even have them come and take a look at the property. So I like that one. I've always liked that. I thought that it really shows a seller how far is too far. And you can see you get too far pretty quick.
Right. Hey, Don,
Yes,
there's always a strategy that I've used for years. Just like fair market value is one thing. What am I appraised for? We're trying to sell your house. And let's say you have 2 other houses that like yours on the market already, right? And so you're looking like, so here's what it should sell for. But since we have competition, pricing it a little bit more competitively, a little bit less than market price will probably drive interest, oftentimes using the other houses to turn your house. And historically, I've seen multiple offers driving it over the asking price in that kind of scenario because it looks like the better deal. Therefore, people are invested in bidding it up, right? So there's always that conversation as well you could do for a listing.
Ooh, when you said that, it just hit me that script that I was talking about, where they'll use yours as leverage to sell the others, create the flip side of that. And I don't know why I never thought of it before, but it just hit me when you said it. So, okay, so that's the argument that they're going to use yours as leverage to sell theirs. Let's flip the script on them and use theirs as leverage to sell ours.
100%. Yep.
Ooh, I like that. Thanks. I'm using that. I'm stealing that, and I'm not giving you credit. I'm stealing it. I like that. I like that because it's like let's flip the script on them, and let's use theirs to sell ours. And how do we do that? We just make ours just a little bit better. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. Man, I wish I was out there still selling now. And this one too, here's, the dangers of overpricing. The dangers of overpricing is you riding that wave there for about 3 weeks of who is going to be coming and looking at your house. And then it starts going downhill pretty quickly. And the only way really at that point, the only way to really save anything at all and maybe increase it back a little bit would be most likely dropping the price, because it's not going to be added exposure, because you're hitting that exposure market, as quickly as you can. And so you've got to be doing something to make it more palatable for people to come back and look at. So what do you have to do? Lower the price, offer something, seller concessions, do whatever it is you have to do. And so the dangers of overpricing is that probably the people who would have been interested in coming to look at it, they've already moved on. So
there's an old graphic by the National Association of Realtors that said that 80% of the potential buyers will see it in the first 2 weeks. And we see that reflected in this graph as well. The majority of your buyers, the opportunity happens pretty quick. So you want to price it up right early. Yep. And it looks like Dula's got her hand raised.
Yeah.
Go ahead and unmute, Dula. Okay. Well, when she gets ready, go ahead.
Okay. Maybe she's stretching. That's why her hands up.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that's the last slide I got for this part. Because talking about, making sure that you price it right, the dangers of not pricing it right, I think that's the last slide. So that's the last one for this part. And then the rest of the slides all have to do with those other 3 questions. And so I just thought we'd take them one at a time, one question at a time.
That's really helpful. So any questions from the agents here? Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Don.
Ask us, because Marty is a master lister as well.
It's definitely my specialty, but I love this. It's really good class, Don.
I became a listing agent really by not so much by choice, but almost forced on me, because I got in the business so young that buyers wanted nothing to do with me. I got in when I was 23, and buyers wanted nothing to do with me. They felt like I didn't have the life experience to help them at that point to spend $50,000 on a house. I had a guy ask me one time, "How old are you?" And I told him, and he said, "I've got socks older than you."
That's funny.
And it's like,
I will say this, another statistic I use oftentimes for our agents is, on average, for every buyer you work with, it equates to 1.5 more transactions. You'll get a referral every once in a while, you'll get whatever. And for every seller where you list and sell, it's 2.5. So it's a multiplier for your business. You're going to pick up a buyer, probably you're going to pick up another seller, and typically, or a referral. So typically it's a multiplier, 2.5 to 1.5. So it's definitely something you should incorporate into your business. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, one listing could lead to 3 or 4 or 5 sign calls, or now you have inventory to expose to the market and advertise, and so much that you can do. One buyer is not going to lead to 2, 3, 4 listings, most likely.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
You may list their house later on, but yeah.
And I'm not saying that buyers agents can't make very, very, very good money, because they can. But when you look at the majority of the top producers, they are extremely strong listing agents. And that just kind of feeds on itself. I mean, for you, because people see your signs, and they see that you're out there, and you can even see it in companies. The companies that typically have the most listings, that have the most signs out there, that they have the most brand recognition.
Mm-hmm. Market share. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Any questions, everybody? Lena, good. Thanks.
I had a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I've got 2 listings coming in the market in Cyprus, and one of them is a kind of oddball. I mean, the house is newer, but there's not a lot of 2 stories that have been selling in the last 6 months. And so I've been going through the pendings, to understand the market and see what's happening. In your opinion, when you would adjust, because the only thing that I'm seeing selling is the 1 stories, which are a little bit higher, but my perception is that people typically willing to pay a little bit more for 1 story than for 2 stories. So I didn't know for sure if you had any recommendation on that.
Oh, yeah. You want to go first, Marty? I see you shaking your head, so I know you do. Go ahead.
I didn't hear you. Sorry, Don.
Oh, I said, I see you shaking your head, so I know you do too. I know. And we're probably going to say pretty much the same thing, but go ahead and say what you were going to say.
The question was the 1 story versus a 2 story.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. She was asking that you see that the 1 stories are typically a little bit higher, maybe price per square foot or something like that. So I think she was asking, is that what we normally see?
Yes. And then generally, because you have more foundation and you have more roofing space on a 1 story typically. So the cost to construct a 1 story is more than a 2 story typically. And there's, obviously that price per square footage will be higher, and there's a certain marketing where you want to market towards people that want no stairs. You want people that want an open space or a 1 level. So there's definitely a niche to it, or a way to market those. But yeah, the reason they're cost more is they cost more to construct. Don?
And how would you then adjust for, so I have a two story that's coming to the market, but I don't have any 2 stories, 1 that have sold in the last 6 months. And the ones that I have seen that have sold, they're like 600 more square feet. To just adjust down and use that as your price point analysis is what you'd recommend?
Yeah, in many cases, you're going to have to adjust because there are different types of houses. It's unfortunate that you don't have another 1 story. But yeah, since it is a little bit more per square footage value-wise, you need to reflect that in some ways, saying, all right, this is going to be priced less than ours based on a 2-story. But market the sun out of the fact that the 1-story is probably more attractive. So I would definitely take it into account, but not sell it too cheaply. Don, what do you think?
Yep. What's the age of the house?
2005.
Oh, so there's still not a builder out there. One of the things that I found helpful is if you're in an area where there's builders around anywhere, go get their price sheet and look and see price per square foot, what their 2 stories are running and what their 1 stories are running. And a lot of times I found that the difference was about 5%. And I'm not saying use 5%. I'm just saying that a lot of times I saw, and Marty's 100% right. It costs more to build a 1-story than it does a 2-story. And typically the 1-stories are smaller than the 2 stories. And so this is where we talk about price per square foot. And on a 1-story, you probably need a larger lot, a little bit larger lot, since everything does sit on the ground. And it does cost more to construct because the 2 most expensive components of home construction, foundation and roof, are all, the house is all sitting on the ground. So you have more foundation, you have more roof. And so it is going to cost more to construct, and it's going to cost more to purchase. And supply and demand, that as the population continues to age, and especially people like engineers who hate the idea of heating and cooling 2 stories versus 1, that, 2 units versus 1, cost conscious people, the 1 stories just become more popular over time on all of that. So even supply and demand, it's going to happen. That 2nd story is not going to cost as much to build as if it were a 1-story, just the way that it is. But a lot of times I saw that the difference was right around 5% for a 1-story versus a 2-story. And the other reason why that price per square foot wise, if I have a 1-story home that's 2,000 square feet and it's sitting on a lot and it's got all the same amenities that this 2-story has over here, we have to remember that the price per square foot pays for everything. It doesn't just pay for the square footage of that house. It pays for the lot. It pays for the location. It pays for the amenities. It pays for everything. Same thing over here, this 2-story. It has a lot, and it has the same amenities because it's in the same neighborhood. It has all the same stuff. But when I take the cost and I divide it out by using the square footage of the house, if the 1-story home is smaller, I'm dividing a similar number by smaller square footage. So the price per square foot is going to be higher than it is over here on the 2-story, where there's more square footage, but it's basically paying for the same lot. It's paying for the same amenities and all of that. When you take that number and divide it out by the square footage, it's going to come out less per square foot.
And one more thing, something that most people don't think about, a 2,000 square foot 1-story home is actually more square footage than a 2,000 square foot 2-story home, because you have to take into account the stairs. When you think about the stairs, it takes away, 50, 100 square foot, whatever it may be, but you actually get more floor space in a 1-story home than you do in a 2-story home.
Yeah, and especially in today's floor plans, where a 2-story, you could have like a living room that's open all the way up to the 2nd floor, and that's not really living space on that 2nd floor. Whereas on the 1-story, everything you can walk on. So yeah, absolutely. Yep. Did that help at all? Or
Yes.
did we just impress you with our knowledge?
No, no, it helped tremendously. Thank you both.
All
Any
right.
more questions? Okay. Don, nice job. Nice job today.
Thank you, sir.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Elena commented as well. She hasn't used the new construction approach for a while. So good job.
All right. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Good deal.
Stop.